Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat Shalom.
which is peace on Yahweh's holy Sabbath day. And we have a holy day that we are celebrating tonight as well. It's a lot more traffic on the street than it normally is when it's time for our holy days, because we have several things going on at the same time. You just gonna broadcast right there to me. Well, I tell you what. But of course, today is also what they call Good Friday, and when you deal with what has been given to our people, it has been given to us to celebrate not the Passover, which is the commemoration of Him shedding blood to really make atonement for our sins. What they end up giving us is, of course, Easter Sunday, which is supposed to be the resurrection. But we already have a holy day for that, and it's called Feast of First Fruits. He was raised as first fruits unto men. So there was already a holy day for the day that He rose. But you can see how the equation of how things are kept keeps that Easter right around Passover, no matter what. That whole Council of Nicaea was they set that up in 325 AD to try and get a pinpoint a date for Easter, and they couldn't, because they knew that they needed to keep it around this certain time. But Constantine was trying to get them to pinpoint a set date, just like all the other man-made holidays had a set date. Easter is the only one that you do not know what day it's going to be on, or the date of Easter. You don't know it until they put out the calendar. Every other man-made day, you can tell exactly what the date is, except that one, because this one has to mimic the Passover, and the Passover doesn't have a set date as far as their calendar goes. We know as far as our calendar goes, it's going to be the 14th day of the first month at even. But understanding that they have to mimic ours, that means they couldn't give a date for Easter. So there were certain things that never did make sense. Like, how do you have a date for everything, but you don't have a date for this? Because they couldn't pinpoint a date for it, because it has to mimic our Passover. So they couldn't pinpoint a date for that one. But this is what most people grew up with, a picture of Passover on their wall, but never kept Passover because they changed the name and told us that it was the Last Supper. So since we saw it as the Last Supper, we never understood that that was always Passover on our wall. It was always something that we were supposed to be keeping. It was always something that was supposed to truly mean something to us if we were going to serve the Most High Covenant God of Israel. But brother, would you read the oracles and entreat the angel that stands at the door to come in and sup with us and us with him, that we may make this a holy convocation by the angel's presence?
1 Peter chapter 4, verses 7 through 11. But the end of all things is at hand. Be you therefore sober, and watch unto prayer. And above all things have fervent love among yourselves, for love shall cover the multitude of sins. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. As every man has received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of Elohim. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of Elohim. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which Elohim gives, that Elohim in all things may be glorified through Yahshua the Mashiach, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. Amen. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 29 through chapter 5 and verse 4. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of Elohim, whereby you are sealed until the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be you kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as Elohim for Yahshua's sake has forgiven you. Be you therefore followers of Elohim, as dear children, and walk in love, as the Mashiach also have loved us, and has given himself for us an offering and sacrifice to Elohim for a sweet-smelling savor. But fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not be once named among you as become saints. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather given of thanks. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Keep your foot when you go to the house of Elohim, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with your mouth, and let not your heart be hasty to utter anything before Elohim. For Elohim is in heaven, and you upon earth, therefore let your words be few. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 1 and 2.
No, you jumping around, I think so.
Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 and 21. Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way, and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him, and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Revelations chapter 3, verses 20 through 22. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcomes will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I have also overcame and am sat down with my Father in his throne. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says unto the churches.
All right, we're going to begin today's sermon in Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23, and we're going to read verses 4 through 14. And we have been going over certain things leading up to tonight, because there were certain things that I wanted you guys to have gone over before we get to the night of Passover. So if it's someone who's just tuning in on the internet, the last two sermons are things that you might want to go over if you missed those things. Leviticus chapter 23, and we're going to start that at verse 4.
These are the feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover.
Right, and the first month for the Hebrew calendar is not the same as the first month for the Gregorian calendar. We know that the beginning of the Gregorian calendar is January. We know that absolutely nothing is growing in January. It's not the beginning of anything. We know that when our month began, we automatically saw that there was a change in the trees. We saw a change in flowers. We saw the trees started to bloom. We saw all of these things in the beginning of our month. This is why they couldn't pinpoint a day for Easter, because they have to make their Easter around Passover, and this has to happen in its season. Go ahead.
Verse 6. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread.
Now, leaven is a representation of sin. So if you are eating unleavened bread, the whole practice of being unleavened is to be without sin. And we know that none of us are physically without sin. This is our attempt at doing these things, and this is our this repetitive thing, so that we can know that it's something that we need to deal with year by year. It's not like it's just something that we do one time and we're straight for the rest of our lives. That's not how sin works. So tonight is beginning the Passover. Tomorrow night will begin then the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it says you must eat unleavened bread 7 days. So you should have you some matzos or something that you have in your houses that you can eat some unleavened bread for 7 days. Every day within this week, you should eat unleavened bread. Go ahead.
Verse 7. Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 7. In the first day you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein.
All right. No, servile work is work that you get paid for. So the first day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath. Now, the way these things are falling, everything is then happening within this weekend. We have Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Just on the way here, before getting here, even throughout earlier today, the streets were packed everywhere. So if you thought you were going to do some running around today like you had been doing the week before and the week before, oh, you got a surprise today. Because this traffic was horrible everywhere. And then every church I passed was packed because they are celebrating something different. They're celebrating Good Friday. So instead of celebrating the Messiah shedding his blood for their sins, what they have been told to celebrate is the day of resurrection. Go ahead.
Verse 8. But you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh 7 days. In the 7th day is an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein.
Right. So then the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins with a Sabbath and it ends with the Sabbath. Go ahead.
And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest.
The first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. When you talk about what is supposed to be given unto Yahweh, your best is the first things that you receive. And those are the ways that Yahweh has set things up so that even when you look at the situation of Cain and Abel, you have Abel's offering, because it was of the flock. If it was a sin offering, then it would have meant something that it had blood and the ability to have atonement blood in it. But that wasn't the kind of offering it was. When you then talk about an offering, it does say that he gave the first of his increase. That is what made his offering acceptable in that case. Go ahead.
And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Shabbat, the priest shall wave it.
So, verse 11, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. So then you have Passover, day 1, Feast of Unleavened Bread is the beginning of that feast, and it is a Sabbath. The tomorrow after that Sabbath is then where this first fruit is waved. So that's the 3rd day. You have Passover, the beginning of Feast of Unleavened Bread. The next day is first fruits. If you even read 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 23, it'll automatically tell you that Christ rose as first fruits unto men. So there was no need to have a resurrection Sunday. There was already, Yahweh knows everything before it's set into play. So he has already set forth a holy day for this day that he is going to arise. Go ahead.
Verse 12. And you shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf and he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto Yahweh.
And Yahshua was that he lamb that was offered up. Go ahead.
And the meat offering thereof shall be 2/10 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto Yahweh for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the 4th part of an hin. And you shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your Elohim.
Now, what this means is at first fruits, when all of the males are to make their appearance, if each male does not offer an offering, then these things he can't eat. You shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your Elohim. And if you research what all products have this in it, you're going to be eating cardboard. Because this stuff is in everything. So Yahweh has set it up until you come forth before him correctly, then you have to take all of these things out of your diet. Go ahead.
It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings.
All right, let's go to Leviticus chapter 16. Leviticus chapter 16, and we're going to read verses 1 through 10.
Verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they offered before Yahweh and died. And Yahweh said unto Moshe, Speak unto Aaron your brother, that he come not at all times into the holy place within the veil before the mercy seat, which is upon the ark, that he die not, for I will appear in the cloud upon the mercy seat.
Right. So when it comes down to doing and presenting yourself before the holiest of things, he said this does not need to be some regular thing that you think is a hangout spot. Make sure you talk to him that he come not at all times. And when he comes, he needs to come a certain way. Go ahead.
Thus shall Aaron come into the holy place with a young bullock for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering.
So don't come into the holiest place without an offering. Go ahead.
He shall put on the holy linen coat, and he shall have the linen breeches upon his flesh, and shall be girded with a linen girdle, and with the linen mitre shall he be attired. These are holy garments.
These are holy garments. So all of these things, make sure he have these things on, and then it says, and make sure he has this mitre. Make sure his head covered. Make sure he don't come before me without something on his head. Go ahead.
Therefore shall he wash his flesh in water, and so put them on. And he shall take of the congregation of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats for a sin offering, and 1 ram for a burnt offering. And Aaron shall offer his bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make an atonement for himself and for his house.
And this is some of the part that ends up getting missed about the Passover. It is the atonement properties that are contained in the Passover. There's one thing about this Passover, but when you deal with the atonement blood that ends up that was shed for this, it is a little bit heavier than a lot of times we examine it, because in the very first Passover, it was that blood of the lamb that they had to put over their door that ended up protecting them from that destroyer that came amongst them. So in these days and times, we are protected by the blood of the lamb, and how we get under that blood is being baptized in the name of Yahshua. Go ahead.
And he shall take the 2 goats and present them before Yahweh at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And Aaron shall cast lots upon the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahweh, and the other lot for the scapegoat. And Aaron shall bring the goat upon which Yahweh's lot fell, and offer him for a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before Yahweh, to make an atonement with him, and to let him go for a scapegoat into the wilderness.
All right, so then there are these 2 goats. One is going to be sacrificed. One is going to be freed. Hold your place right there, because we're going to come back to it. Let's go to Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23, and we're going to read verses 13 through 25.
And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said unto them, You have brought this man unto me, as one that perverteth the people. And, behold, I have examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof you accuse him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and, lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast.
Right. So when you get right down to it, even though these people have done much trouble to the children of Israel, they are trying to release Yeshua. Go ahead.
And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison.
So, now Israel had been persuaded to do this, and it's something that we'll go into a little later, but it says, for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was he cast into prison. And they desired that the murderer would be freed, but Yeshua would be crucified. So now you have these two goats. One goat is going to be freed. The other goat is going to be sacrificed. See, a lot of times people don't understand that they are fulfilling prophecy. They think they're doing whatever it is they're doing. Sometimes people might be doing something mean to you, and you think, oh man, this is really bad what they're doing. And Yahweh making sure they do every last bit of it, because it's going to make you do something that he needs you to do. We want to believe that we would do all of this stuff on our own, but the truth is we won't. Go ahead.
Verse 20. Pilate therefore, willing to release Yeshua, spake again to them. But they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why, what evil has he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him, and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required.
Verse 23, and they were instant with loud voices requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests. And this is who pushed them to make that decision. The chief priests. Go ahead.
And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired. But he delivered Yeshua to their will.
Right. He delivered him to go ahead and be crucified. Now, they don't understand that they are fulfilling prophecy in the things that they are doing. Because it is the chief priests that offer up the lamb, that offers up the sacrifice for the children of Israel. So it was the chief priest that was pushing the people to say, away with him, not understanding that they are doing exactly what is written in the book. Now, the strange thing about it is all of these people study the book. We're talking about the chief priests. We're not talking about just some people. This is what they do. But when you're driven by feelings, those feelings will then take over, and you don't even see the actions that you yourself are performing. When you consider the things of Yehudas Iscariot and betraying the Messiah, betraying Christ, he didn't understand what he had actually done until the whole deed was over. Because after that, the demonic spirit is he's done. Now he leaves you with those very feelings that he used to get you there. Let's go back to Leviticus 16. Leviticus 16, and let's read verses 11 through 19.
Verse 11. And Aaron shall bring the bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall make an atonement for himself and for his house, and shall kill the bullock of the sin offering, which is for himself. And he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from off the altar before Yahweh, and his hands full of sweet incense beaten small, and bring it within the veil. And he shall put the incense upon the fire before Yahweh, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is upon the testimony, that he die not. And he shall take of the blood of the bullock, and sprinkle it with his finger upon the mercy seat eastward. And before the mercy seat shall he sprinkle of the blood with his finger 7 times.
So when he go into this, first of all, Yahweh said he can't come always into this place because it represents the holiest of holy. This, you have to have the cloud. Remember, it was this fire and this cloud that Yahweh directed the children with. The mercy seat is where Yahweh would then commune with the children of Israel. So this represents coming into the presence of Yahweh. You do not come always into the presence of Yahweh. And when you do, you come with an offering and you make sure you are attired correctly. Go ahead.
Verse 15. Then shall he kill the goat of the sin offering that is for the people, and bring his blood within the veil, and do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bullock, and sprinkle it upon the mercy seat and before the mercy seat.
So the mercy seat belongs to Yahweh. This is then where the blood is sprinkled that you make atonement with. Go ahead.
And he shall make an atonement for the holy place, because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions and all their sins. And so shall he do for the tabernacle of the congregation that remains among them in the midst of their uncleanness. And there shall be no man in the tabernacle of the congregation when he goes in to make an atonement in the holy place, until he come out, and have made an atonement for himself, and for his household, and for all the congregation of Israel. And he shall go out onto the altar that is before Yahweh, and make an atonement for it, and shall take of the blood of the bullock, and of the blood of the goat, and put it upon the horns of the altar round about. And he shall sprinkle of the blood upon it with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it, and hallow it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel.
Right. So then he has to take this blood in to where Yahweh's seat is, to sprinkle the blood upon it, to make atonement for the sanctuary, the children of Israel, and all their uncleanness. All right, let's go to John chapter 20. John chapter 20. And we're going to read verses 11 through 17.
Verse 11. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and sees 2 angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Yahshua had lain. And they say unto her, Woman, why weepeth you? She says unto them, Because they have taken away my Adonai, and I know not where they have laid him. And when she had thus said, she turned herself back, and saw Yahshua standing, and knew not that it was Yahshua. Yahshua says unto her, Woman, why weepeth thou? Whom seeketh you? She, supposing him to be the gardener, says unto him, Sir, if you had borne him hence, tell me where you have laid him, and I'll take him away. Yahshua says unto her, Miriam. She turned herself, and says unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Yahshua says unto her,
Now, understanding that upon this resurrection, he has a different kind of body. The resurrected body has power that the normal body does not have. This is why in the first instance, she is looking at him and she doesn't know it's him. He's able to change that body and do things with it. He's able to move in places that a normal body does not have the ability to do. Go ahead.
Yahshua says unto her, touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren, and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father, and your Father, and to my Elohim, and to your Elohim.
Right. He told her, touch me not, because I have not ascended unto my Father. So what he has to do is the very things that we read in the Old Testament. He has to then take the blood that he shed himself and anoint the altar in heaven with it. Then he can come back and deal with them. But he cannot deal with them as of yet until he goes and takes care of that bit of business. Leviticus chapter 22. See, you can read these things in the New Testament, but if you don't know why certain things are happening, you know, he just says, okay, I got to go to my Father. You know, don't touch me right now. You don't really understand why he has to go and then come back. Then he can deal with them. Then he tell them they can touch him. They can do all kind of stuff after that. What was the difference? He had to fulfill that job. He had to do that job that a high priest has to perform for the children of Israel. Because once he makes this atonement for the children of Israel, then that opens it up for the rest of the world. See, if the children of Israel are not saved, the rest of the world is not saved. For the Gentiles to be saved, for everybody else to be saved, he has to first deal with Israel. He deals with Israel, then the doors open up to the rest of the world. Leviticus chapter 22, and let's read verses 17 through 25.
And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, speak unto Aaron and to his sons, and unto all the children of Israel, and say unto them, whatsoever he be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers in Israel, that will offer his oblation for all his vows, and for all his freewill offerings, which they will offer unto Yahweh for a burnt offering, you shall offer at your own will a male without blemish, of the beeves, of the sheep, or of the goats. But whatsoever has a blemish, that shall you not offer, for it shall not be acceptable for you.
Right, and we have to consider what we will do or what we do in these days and times that makes our offering blemished. Go ahead.
And whosoever offers a sacrifice of peace offerings unto Yahweh to accomplish his vow, or a freewill offering in beeves or sheep, it shall be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no blemish therein. Blind, or broken, or maimed, or having a wean, or scurvy, or scab, you shall not offer these unto Yahweh, nor make an offering by fire of them upon the altar of Yahweh. Either a bullock or a lamb that has anything superfluous or lacking in his parts, that may you offer for a freewill offering, but for a vow it shall not be accepted. You shall not offer unto Yahweh that which is bruised, or crushed, or broken, or cut, neither shall you make any offering thereof in your land.
So we have to consider when we offer an offering unto Yahweh, do we offer the things that are bruised, crushed, broken, or cut? That even gets down to our time that we offer unto Yahweh. Do you offer him the bruised, damaged, cut time that you got left over? Go ahead.
Verse 25. Neither from a stranger's hand shall you offer the bread of your Elohim of any of these, because their corruption is in them, and blemishes be in them. They shall not be accepted for you.
They shall not be accepted for you. Let's go to Matthew chapter 27. Matthew chapter 27, and let's read verses, let's start at verse 15.
Now at that feast the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner whom they would. And they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, Whom will you that I release unto you, Barabbas or Yeshua, which is called the Anointed One? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him.
He knew that for envy they had delivered him. This is why sometimes you have to go and read something in both accounts, because we know that when different people tell a story, some people leave out certain parts and other people remember some other parts. But when you deal with it, he knew that they had a jealousy issue with him. Correct?
When he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, Have you nothing to do with that just man? For I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Yeshua.
The chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Yeshua. So they were then convinced, they were persuaded to release the murderer, but to persecute this man who they could not even pinpoint something that he had done. But they were jealous that he had done these miracles. He had gotten more attention than the so-called chief priests have received. Go ahead.
Verse 21. The governor answered and said unto them, Whether of the two will you that I release unto you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate says unto them, What shall I do then with Yeshua, which is called the Mashiach? They all say unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, Why? What evil has he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See you to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children.
You see, sometimes people emotion get them right out, and they talking and not understanding what it is they're saying. His blood be on us and on our children. And they rightfully spoke that which they said, because his blood is on us and on our children. Go ahead.
Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Yeshua, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Yeshua into the common hall, and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. And they stripped him, and put on him a scarlet robe. And when they had platted a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand.
So what they're doing then, they're mocking him by giving him the attire, the clothing of a king. They said, oh, you claim that you the king of the Jews? You say you the king of the children of Israel? Then go ahead and put this robe on. Go ahead and put this crown, but we're going to make the crown of thorns so that it stick you and make you bleed. Now hold this scepter right here. So this is all about humiliation at this point. And understand, he's going through these things for sins that he didn't commit. This is why we have to put care in the things that we do, because none of us can offer up an offering better than what was offered up for us. What was offered up for us was a sinless man. There's none of us here, or there are none of us that's listening that are without sin. So even if you tried to offer up yourself, it wouldn't be a good enough sacrifice. And you sure can't go out there and get a goat and offer it. It ain't going to be good enough. So then we have to show honor and respect for this unblemished lamb that was sacrificed for us. Go ahead.
And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Yehudis! Verse 30. And they spit upon him and took the reed and smote him on the head.
They spit on him. Go ahead.
And after that they had mocked him, they took the robe off from him and put his own raiment on him and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simeon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall. And when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink.
So when you deal with Golgotha, this is to say a place of a skull, when they did something that they wanted to make sure the people were afraid of, they left the bodies there. The same way when you talk about what took place in slavery, after they hung the people, they left them there. That was a message to everybody else. So when you talk about why it was called the place of a skull, after they crucified these people, they generally left them there for a little while, so everybody can see them and everybody know we need to be afraid of these people because they'll kill you, and they'll have a public killing. Do you understand? These are public killings that are happening, and then they leave the body there so that it creates fear inside of people. And this is why I tell people, when something happens, when or one of these young unarmed black men get shot by the cops, you have to look at how long they leave the body in the street. And the little bitty sheet that they have don't even cover the whole body. So they're trying to make those people upset. They are trying to make those people revolt. You mean to tell me all these Walmarts, they ain't got a sheet big enough to cover the body? So they're leaving it out there on purpose. But this stuff goes way back. Way, way back. This is not a new tactic. You leave the body out in the street. You leave the body sitting on the tree. You leave the body on the torture stake or the cross so that you can control the minds of those people with fear. Go ahead.
Verse 35. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there, and set up over his head his accusation written, This is Yahshua, the king of the Yehudis.
Right. So now they're going to mock him with this sign. This is supposed to be the king of the Yehudis. And understand, it's the people, our people, the priests, the chief priests, they are able to maintain control because they have made friends with the ruling authority. So they have to be part for the people and then part for the ruling authority. This is how they were able to move this man who actually had more power than them. They were able to move this man and make him commit this act to Yahshua because they kind of lean toward, okay, we're going to tell them Romans that you didn't take care of this business. Go ahead.
Verse 38. Then were there two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their hands.
Wagging their heads.
Pardon me.
Now, when we think we go through something and we think that we've had to undergo some things, all the things that we end up going through are all minuscule compared to this. You're talking about having people spit on you, hit you, you know, put crowns of thorns on your head, do all of these things, and they still gonna kill you. This is just a mocking before the killing. See, there's one thing about being killed. There's something altogether different about being tortured. He was tortured. Prisoners of war get tortured. So if you just take the little short story where they say, okay, he died for our transgressions. No. He didn't just die. He was tortured for our transgressions. They made him die slow. Go ahead.
Verse 40. And saying, you that destroyed the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you be the son of Elohim, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders said, he saved others. Himself he cannot save. If he be the king of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him.
And see, what they didn't understand is he wasn't coming in the capacity of a king at that point. He's coming as a capacity of a lamb to be offered up to put Israel back in their rightful place. So he could not command his power at that time. But when he come back, he will be commanding his power. So he came the first time as a lamb. The next time he's coming as a lion. And don't nobody run up on a lion. They put lions in cages and people still be scared of them. Go ahead.
He trusted in Elohim. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the son of Elohim. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Yahshua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my Elohim, why have you forsaken me?
Now, you have to look at certain things of why it is interesting that they would put the Hebrew version of what he said. Because you then have to consider then all of this stuff where we see Jesus, it was never there. He spoke Hebrew. The whole part of everything that he would have said would have been Hebrew, unless he's dealing with some of these other people. It's just the same as, and we were just talking about this, how Daniel was given the name Belteshazzar by the pagan rulers that ruled over him. That was a name that he had to take amongst them. But amongst his own people, he was Daniel. They're not calling him by that pagan name. They had to accept these pagan names being in captivity. So when they talk amongst one another, they're going to speak the language that they grew up speaking, not the language of the captors who rule over them. And if you think about it, our people did the same thing, even though we didn't know another language. We knew English, and that's all we knew. Our folks would sit there and sing songs and would be talking to each other right under the nose of the slave master, and nobody knew what they were saying. They would be singing, letting them know, all right, man, you better hurry up and grab them watermelon. They knew everything. They was directing to each other what was going on through song. They spoke a different language within the same language, which is the same thing that you know how to do the more you understand this book. When you understand this book, we can go amongst people who don't understand anything about this book, and we can talk to one another. If you think you can talk to one another right in front of those people and they won't know what you're talking about, you need to pay attention, because there's going to come a time when you're going to have to use that. When you're going to have to talk to somebody right in front of you, but the person right next to them are not going to know what you're talking about. It happens to us all the time. We go into these other strange places. We see them coming. They start speaking their other language. They start speaking their native tongue when you walk in the door. You're going to be able to do the same thing, because you are learning a different language in this book. And you can say it in plain English, talk about certain stories. We'll know what that is. The person standing there won't. Go ahead.
You know, even in the situation when he was talking to Saul, he didn't disrespect him and call him Paul. He said, Saul, Saul, why persecuteth you me? Call him in his Hebrew name.
Right. Go ahead.
Verse 47. Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran, and took a sponge, and filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. The rest said, Let be. Let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Yahshua, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in two from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many. Now when the centurion and they that were with him, watching Yahshua, saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, Truly this was the Son of Elohim. And many women were there beholding afar off, which followed Yahshua from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Miriam Magdalene, and Miriam the mother of Jacob, and Joses, and the mother of Zebedee's children.
All right, let's go to the book of John, chapter 13. And we also see when we deal with that, it says, and the graves were open, and many of the bodies of the saints which slept. So death is equivalent to sleep. Now, and it said saints. All right? So we know that they weren't evil people. They were saints, and they came out of their graves. They slept. They didn't come out of heaven. See, that Sunday morning doctrine told us that everybody died, went to heaven. These were saints. They came out of the ground. They came out of their burial place. John chapter 13, and let's read verses 1 through 15.
Verse 1. Now before the feast of Passover, when Yahshua knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Yehudas Iscariot, Simeon's son, to betray him, Yahshua, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from Elohim, and went to Elohim.
Now, this is the thing. The adversary of the devil entered in Yehudas Iscariot. This job has to be done. And this is the danger about having weak, unprotected spirits in your midst. That adversary of the devil, he's going to use whatever weak, unprotected spirit he can get his hands on. And the weakest one in the room was Yehudas. But Yahshua knew he was weak. He held the money bag, and Yahshua knew he was a thief. He gave the thief the money back. That's the last thing we would do. We're like, we won't give him the money, he steals. Yahshua like, yeah, I know, that's why. Give him the money. Why would you give him the money? Because I know he's a betrayer. That way he can go ahead and get his practice on. I know how the adversary gonna do. He gonna pick the weakest link, the easiest one for him to pervert. That's what he gonna use. Go ahead.
Verse 4. He rises from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel and girded himself. After that he pours water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simeon Peter. And Cephas says unto him, Adonai, does you wash my feet? Yahshua answered and said unto him, What I do you knoweth not now, but you shall know hereafter.
Right. You don't understand what it is I'm doing now. But I'm cleansing you by washing your feet. This is why we have foot washing on Passover. Go ahead.
Cephas says unto him, You shall never wash my feet. Yahshua answered him, If I wash you not, you have no part with me. Simeon Peter says unto him, Adonai, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Yahshua says to him, He that is washed needs not to save. He that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit. And you are clean, but not all.
Right. He that is cleansed need not only but to wash his feet. When you get right back into this Old Testament, you'll find that they had a washing place for the priest before he went in to go and perform that service. He had to wash himself. Go ahead.
For he knew who should betray him. Therefore said he, You're not all clean. So after he had washed their feet, and had taken his garments, and was set down again, he said unto them, Know you what I've done to you? You call me Master and Adonai, and you say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Adonai and Master, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet.
You also ought to wash one another's feet. See, you ought to help cleanse one another. Go ahead.
For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you.
For I have given you an example. And if we pay attention to these things, these examples that we have been given, there's a whole lot of things we wouldn't be doing. If we paid attention to the example, we wouldn't be trying to keep Easter Sunday. If we paid attention to the example, we would be keeping the Sabbath day. This is the example that was given unto us. So, you know, we have to consider these examples and why these things were given unto us. Now, when we read about this foot washing and what it is, he says, you don't understand what it is I have done to you. We have to also consider that we need to examine ourselves before we take part in this body and blood. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. I want you to read. Now, we read this before, and y'all just stay on that graphic. That's not the next graphic. I'm just going to go off a little bit because we have read this the other day, but I want to go over it again. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verses 23 through 30.
For I have received of the Adonai that which also I delivered unto you, that the Adonai Yahshua the same night in which he was betrayed took bread. And when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, Take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. After the same manner also he took the cup, when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do you, as oft as you drink it, in remembrance of me.
So we know that all of these things were done on Passover. Go ahead.
For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Adonai's death till he come.
So you are taking a part in the Adonai's death till he come. This is something that you need to examine yourself in taking a part of. Go ahead.
Wherefore, whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Adonai unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Adonai.
Right. You have to be within covenant to take a part of that. And how you are in covenant with that is being baptized in the name of Yahshua. Go ahead.
But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. For he that eats and drinks unworthily eats and drinks damnation to himself, not discerning the Adonai's body. For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep.
Right. And if we consider what is written in Mark chapter 16 and verses 15 through 16, it says, He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. So it's not a thing that we can get around. And when we consider how much indignation he had with the scribes and the Pharisees, understand that the scribes and the Pharisees understand what it says and is written about them. It says they disrespected him being not baptized in the name of Yahshua. So they had indignation against him. And how did they show that indignation? By not dealing with who he was. Let's go to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, and let's read verses 23 and 24.
Verse 23. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has aught against you, leave there your gift before the altar, and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift.
Right. Now, these are things that we don't hear in today's churches, and we're not going to hear that from the televangelists, because they are about receiving as much money as they can. What the Mashiach is telling us is, because you have that thing stuck off in your heart, because you have not fixed that thing, your offering is not going to be accepted. He said, pause. Don't even offer that offering. Leave there your gift before the altar. Just pause for a second. Go have that conversation, fix whatever that is, then come and offer, your gift. So he's giving you an opportunity and giving you the layout for how this thing needs to be done. Let's go to Exodus chapter 23. Exodus chapter 23, and we're going to read verses 14 through 18.
Verse 14. 3 times you shall keep a feast unto me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days,
right,
as I command you.
Now, what has commonly happened is that people kind of just merge Passover and unleavened bread into the same feast, and they're not. They're separate. Passover is what happens today. Tomorrow begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That is a 7-day feast that goes all week. But what he's mentioning here are the feasts in which appearances are made. This is what he's talking about, because we know when we talk about all the feasts of Yahweh, there's 7. And the 7th feast is in the 7th month. That's why we have 7 golden candlesticks. Okay? So what he's mentioning here is all the times that the children of Israel must come and make an appearance to Yahweh, and they cannot come empty. This thing is not only done on earth, it is a replica of what's done in heaven. If you read Job chapter 1 and chapter 2, you'll read where it's talking about the sons of Elohim. There came a day when the sons of Elohim came to present themselves, and Lucifer came also. So the angels have to make their appearances. So of course, man is going to have to make his appearance. Go ahead.
In the time appointed of the month Abib, for in it you came out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty.
So then we know that this has happened. We're talking about in the month of Abib. We know that this is during the time of Passover. So we know when these things are supposed to take place. Go ahead.
And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering,
which is also called tabernacles,
which is in the end of the year, when you have gathered in your labors out of the field. 3 times in the year all your males shall appear before Yahweh Elohim. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, neither shall the fat of my sacrifice remain until the morning.
You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread. Leaven is a representation of sin. Leaven is what causes bread to rise up. If something is risen, if it rises, then it is puffed up against Elohim. If something is going to bow down or submit, then it's flat. So understand what it is that we're doing and what we're taking a part of. And when you talk about making that appearance, and it says in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, first fruits is in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That is what we read in Leviticus 23. You begin first, the first day of Feast of Unleavened Bread. The next day would be the Feast of First Fruit after that Sabbath, because the first day of Unleavened Bread is a Sabbath. Let's go to Exodus chapter 19. And let's read verses 10 through 16.
Verse 10. And Yahweh said unto Moshe, Go unto the people, and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the third day. For the third day Yahweh will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai.
Right. So then the people are getting ready to deal with Yahweh their Elohim, but they have to be ready in a certain way. Yahweh said unto Moshe, Go unto the people and sanctify them. See, when you sanctify something, it is set apart. It is then not regular at this point. It says then sanctify them today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes. Be ready against the third day. Sanctification is given in threes. Go ahead.
And you shall set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that you go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches the mount shall be surely put to death.
Right, because if Yahweh is then going to descend upon this mount, then it is now his seat. It is just like the mercy seat at this point. You can't touch it. He's going to come and sit on it. You are then defiling it. Go ahead.
There shall not an hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through.
And in this what happened? When the brothers were carrying the ark and it shook and the brother touched it, he died immediately. That was Yahweh's seat. Go ahead.
Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mount. And Moshe went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, Be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning, that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. All
right, so when you deal with that, we have to make our appearance unto Yahweh our Elohim on this feast of first fruits. So then we must sanctify ourselves against the third day. That means you brothers conduct yourselves accordingly, that you have and this automatically ends up happening within, and I think it's 2 holy days. It actually goes that way on your own. On the last one, you have to make sure that you conduct yourself accordingly. He says, approach not unto your wives. So you have Passover, then you have Feast of Unleavened Bread. We ought to be spiritually clean for all these things anyway. Then you have the Feast of First Fruits. You have already been sanctified against the third day. So men are supposed to be separate from their wives all the way leading up to the appearance. And that's on every appearance that we make. You sanctify yourself against the third day, so that when you go to present yourself before Yahweh, you have been sanctified. And this goes down even when we get all the way in Revelation, and it talks about the children of Israel being sanctified or being separated in that wilderness for 3.5 years. Why do you think it's 3? You can't fight a holy war just being a whole bunch of people with individual thoughts and beliefs. We have to be sanctified unto Yahweh, that we may be able to move with the angel of Yahweh, because that angel will be directing that charge. That angel will be doing those things, and we have to walk in a way that it does not cause that angel to walk away from us. That is all that we're going to do for tonight as far as reading. We will now get prepared to take part in the body and the blood of Yahshua. And like I said before, only those that were baptized in the name of Yahshua need to take part in this portion. Everything else you can still take part in. After that, we're going to have our meal, and the brothers will start to eat. And then after that, we will then do our foot washing. So we will be making our way back to the area that we have designated for those things. That's all that we're going to do for tonight. Enjoy your feast. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.